This is our final lecture together. And in this one, I just want to kind of tie things together, pull everything together. Just kind of a reminder of where we've been and then what will be coming. Now, the beginning of our time together, we looked at the basics of systems. We went through the bridge video and explored what that parable might have looked like. And we talked about the games that we play. That is, the games that we play, how they grow and they change as we move from linear to more systemic thinking. We considered the historic background of Edwin Friedman and Murray Bowen and how they have impacted this field and informed this field. And finally, in Unit 1, we considered anxiety, the basics of anxiety. We looked at the difference between chronic anxiety and acute anxiety. And also, in the first unit, you began reading Uproar. In fact, you read the introduction in parts 1 and 2. In Unit 2, we considered theological foundations, what in as membership meant. And we looked at inness and faith formation, and we considered what it means to be united with Christ. Remember, we looked at Acts 1 or Acts 9, 1 through 9. We talked about transcendent union, and we considered personhood as well. And then we spent a little bit of time considering Trinitarian relationality. One becomes most fully who God intends them to be when we step into the lives of others. My hope is that those basics and theological foundations kind of set up where we went in units 3 and 4. So in unit 3, we considered the three relational barriers. In his book, Edwin Friedman describes the three barriers that limit our imagination and our full potential in relationships. Now, you might go back and reconsider some of the theological foundations that we had talked about. Those three barriers, remember, are a heavy reliance on data rather than our capacity to be decisive. Often, our reliance on data can be limiting. Uh, in fact, our reliance on data has led to two interdependent myths that if we just know more, then we'll be able to fix anything. And that if we fail, it's because we didn't utilize the right technique. The second barrier is our orientation toward empathy rather than responsibility. Um, and we talked a little bit about this being a relatively new term. And empathy is not negative; it's good, it's right. But I'm more concerned of not the proper way of understanding empathy, but how empathy is used today in our context as a disguise for anxiety. And when used in this way, empathy is a tool of sabotage. A tool of sabotage. The third barrier really boils down to a confusion of the self with selfishness. In our culture, the concept of self has become unfairly associated with autocratic and narcissistic behavior rather than integrity. So we consider that. So the addiction to data, which is the fallacy of expertise, the empathy doesn't work, which surviving in a hostile environment, and then the importance of self, narcissism versus integrity. I really do hope that those three barriers will give you great insight how to be more effective in your relationships, in the relationships that you are a part of. Now, remember, when we considered importance of self, we dove into self differentiation and a non anxious presence. It might behoove you to go back and listen to those lectures because self differentiation is an ongoing process, is so important for effective leadership in your families, in your business, wherever. And then finally, in Unit 4, we considered emotional triangles, crisis, and sabotage. And the emotional triangles, as I indicated, are the basic building blocks of all relationships. and they're central to understanding communication from a systems perspective. So we looked at the laws of emotional triangles. How do they form? How do they operate? We talked about interlocking triangles, and then we looked at stress in triangles. Triangles, if you can begin to learn how to read triangles, how to be aware of when they are established, you can be um, a most powerful person in the sense then that not that you yield and wield your power, but that you are very much aware of how the relationships are forming and deforming in relationship systems. Um, so I hope that was helpful. And of course, then we looked at and considered the presence of crisis and sabotage, and how a well differentiated leader will actually trigger sabotage in a relationship system. And I asked you to consider one time when your differentiation triggered sabotage and when someone else's differentiation triggered you and you attempted to sabotage. That self awareness is important. And then finally, we considered the presence of the past. It's important, absolutely important to remember that what has occurred in the past, maybe one, two, or three generations, does impact, inform, and influence what takes place in the present. This is To think otherwise is to completely deny the important transmission of emotional processes. And I spoke about a genogram. I mentioned genograms as an important tool to explore this in your own families. So, my hope is in this last unit is that you will pull things together. So you're going to be writing a brief reflection paper, and then for your final assessment, you will be, of course, you're going to be finished. You're going to be reading the rest of Uproar if you haven't already finished it, in responding to that, and then your final assessment will be a case study. So I've enjoyed this journey with you. Appreciate you. Blessings and peace.